Marguerite de la Motte was a great silent star of the 1920s and made a slow but successful transition to the talkies. But after 1930, her talkie career was sporadic. Why? Join me as I investigate. Marguerite was born in 1902 in Duluth, Minnesota to Joseph and Nellie de la Motte. Her father was a lawyer. From a young age, Marguerite studied ballet. In 1913, Marguerite and her family moved to San Diego. According to an interview that she gave later with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, Marguerite studied with famed ballerina Anna Pavlova at some point. I'm assuming that Pavlova may have come through California on a tour and offered a class to young ballerinas. By the time she was 16 in 1918, Marguerite had begun to dance ballet professionally in Los Angeles, eventually becoming the star dancer at Sid Grauman's theater. It was there that Marguerite was spotted by Douglas Fairbanks, who cast her in a supporting role in her film debut, 1918's Arizona, a Western comedy. The film was a hit and got a good review for its supporting cast and variety. Marguerite was off to a great start, and in 1919 appeared in 6 films, beginning with supporting roles in films starring Bessie Barriscale, William Desmond, and H.B. Warner, before working her way up to starring with Warner in For a Woman's Honor, which also starred John Gilbert. She then was leading lady to William Desmond in Dangerous Waters. In late 1919, Marguerite was leading lady to Jack Pickford in the surviving comedy In Wrong, where she played a good girl that is pursued by the bumbling hero played by Pickford. It was a charming performance and showed Marguerite as a talented leading lady, equally capable in moments of comedy and drama, and allowed her to fall neatly into the niche of the beautiful young ingenue that is pursued and often rescued by the leading man. While Marguerite would demonstrate that she was able to handle more varied types of roles later, she would play similar types of roles over the next few years. However, despite the roles often being so similar, Marguerite's considerable talent was evident in each performance. Sadly, 1919 was also a year of great tragedy for Marguerite, as she would lose her mother in a car accident and her father not soon after to a heart attack. In 1920, Marguerite starred in 6 films, including Trumpet Island, in which she played a young woman forced to leave her love to marry another man, only to crash land onto her love's island later. The film got her an excellent review in moving picture world. Marguerite's biggest hit of 1920 and the 5th biggest hit commercially of the year was The Mark of Zorro, which reunited her with Douglas Fairbanks. This time she played Lolita, the object of the famous hero's affection. The film was also a critical hit, and Variety stated that Marguerite gave Lolita a romantic charm. In 1921, Marguerite teamed up with Fairbanks again in 2 more smash hits. First, they starred in the wacky comedy The Nut, which saw Doug as an inventor who wishes to help his girlfriend, played by Marguerite, in her plans to assist less fortunate children. But Marguerite holds her own physically too, escaping with him through an air vent in one scene. Variety praised Marguerite's work in this film as well. The team's second smash hit that year was The Three Musketeers, the 3rd highest grossing film of the year. Doug starred as D'Artagnan, the hero of the story, and Marguerite portrayed Constance, a seamstress of the queen who captures his heart. Doug and Marguerite played several beautiful romantic scenes together in the film, and Marguerite was again praised by Variety for the beautiful romantic emotions that she brought to the screen. Marguerite starred in several films over the next few years, eventually branching out from her romantic ingenue niche. Highlights include playing Sympathy Gibbs, a woman that escapes an abusive relationship and finds love with a town preacher in Shadows in 1922, which also starred Harrison Ford and Lon Chaney and got her an excellent review in Variety. Also, The Jilt from 1922 saw her as a woman caught in a complicated love triangle. Other films included Just Like a Woman from 1923, which saw her shine in a comedic role, Wandering Daughters from 1923, which saw her as a young woman from a respectable family that becomes attracted to a seedy character from the wrong side of town, and The Beloved Brute from 1924, which saw her as a dance hall girl. Around 1923, Marguerite met a man that would become influential in both her professional and personal life, John Bowers, who would become her husband in 1924 and her most frequent co-star in the movies for several years. Beginning with What a Wife Learned in 1923, Marguerite and John would team up for 12 films together over the next 4 years, becoming one of the screen's most famous husband and wife teams. Some of their notable films together included Desire from 1923, Those Who Dare from 1924, Flattery, 1925, Daughters Who Pay, also from 1925, which saw the pair star in an intriguing love story concerning the Russian Revolution, Pals in Paradise from 1926, and Ragtime in 1927. Marguerite also starred in several other films without her husband throughout the 20s. However, despite their steady work throughout the 20s, neither Marguerite nor John made a film in 1928. It appears that Marguerite signed with Producers Distributing Corporation in the mid-20s, and after the company went defunct and changed ownership in 27, she freelanced for the rest of the year. I couldn't find much information about what Marguerite and John did for their year off. Perhaps they just needed a vacation. However, when they both returned to the screen in 1929, the entire landscape for motion pictures had changed. Marguerite was summoned by her old pal Douglas Fairbanks to reprise her role of Constance from The Three Musketeers in its sequel, The Iron Mask, which featured a talking intro by Fairbanks and synchronized music and sound effects. Despite this film being a huge hit, it did not lead to Marguerite making a successful transition to the other talkies yet. She followed it up with another silent, MOTTE Rose. John, meanwhile, had major supporting roles in two successful talkies in 29, which sadly also did not really help his career. Marguerite waited another full year before making her talkie debut, and John too was inactive around the same time. While I can't find any concrete information about their activities, my guess would be that both of them were concerned about their futures in the talkies and decided to go on the stage. According to ClassicActresses.org, we know that they began to tour in vaudeville, so they may have begun that as early as 1929. In late 1930, Marguerite starred in Shadow Ranch, finally making her talkie debut as tough ranch owner Ruth Cameron, who must get the help of Buck Jones and getting revenge on the men that killed their friend and are trying to steal her land. While the performance was great, this film sadly also did not seem to help Marguerite's film career in the talkies. John Bowers also starred in a Western in 1931 that had similar results for him. It was in 1931 that I'm assuming that both of them focused all of their attention on the vaudeville stage full-time. Marguerite did not return to the screen until 1934, finally making her second talkie, A Woman's Man at Poverty Row Monogram Pictures, in which she starred as temperamental diva Gloria Jordan and gave an absolutely hilarious performance. Photoplay labeled this film as Marguerite's comeback, and praised both it and her acting. While they also stated that her long vacation has improved her acting, I think that they are not necessarily referring to her talent improving, but instead referencing the fact that this film tapped into another level of her talent that was previously hidden behind her niche as the beautiful damsel in distress. Marguerite is a total scream as Gloria and flawlessly demonstrates a lovely comedic timing. However, despite Marguerite making a welcome return to the screen in this film, it was her final film of the decade. Off the screen, Marguerite was going through a very rough patch. John had sunk into a tragic depression over the state of his career and had fallen deeper and deeper into alcoholism. I imagine that the situation became so dire that it caused Marguerite to have to step away from the screen after she completed A Woman's Man. Eventually, Marguerite separated from John, although they never officially divorced. Tragically, in 1936, John took his own life by walking into the ocean after failing to secure work in a film on Catalina Island. He was just 50 years old. According to multiple sources, John's mental illness and eventual suicide was the partial inspiration for Norman Maine in A Star is Born, which would be released just a year later. Marguerite stayed off the screen for another several years, finally returning in 1941 to make a cameo as a mother to one of the leading juvenile characters in the comedy Regular Fellers. She then had two small parts in two movies in 1942, The Man Who Returned to Life, which starred John Howard, and finally as Rose the Waitress in two episodes of the Western serial Overland Mail, which starred Lon Chaney Jr. After completing it, Marguerite left the movies for good. According to ClassicActresses.org, Marguerite married attorney Sidney Rivkin in 1939, but that marriage ended in divorce in 1943. During World War II, Marguerite took a job as an inspector in a war plant and eventually began to work for the Red Cross in San Francisco, where she worked for the next several years. Sadly, in March of 1950, Marguerite passed away from a coronary thrombosis following an operation. She was just 47 years old. While her death was a great tragedy, At least her obituaries gave her one last time to shine, listing her many wonderful screen accomplishments to remind the public of what a star she truly was. So we are left with the question, why did Marguerite de la Motte's stardom falter in the talkies? I think the real culprit was Marguerite and John taking a year off in 1928, just when talkies were coming into fruition. They both also had reached slight setbacks in their silent careers shortly before that, which probably caused the break they took to happen. While they both found great opportunities in 1929, those movies did not reignite their stardom. I'm wondering if both of them were worried about the state of their careers, and that's what drove them away from Hollywood into vaudeville. When both returned to the movies again, they found it even more difficult to find success in the talkies. It's a real shame. Both were extremely talented and could easily have made successful talkie careers. Marguerite demonstrated in 1934's A Woman's Man that she had a real flair for zany comedy, playing a spoiled diva effortlessly and showing a side of her that moviegoers had never seen before. I believe she really could have made a go of it, especially moving into character actress territory, and had a career probably similar to that of Gladys George, Marjorie Rambeau, Alice Brady, and later Agnes Moorehead. Sadly, it was not to be. Fortunately, we have several of Marguerite's films still around to enjoy. I suggest checking out Three Musketeers, The Mark of Zorro, Shadow Ranch, and A Woman's Man all on YouTube, and check out The Iron Mask on my YouTube channel for free. Also be sure to check out my episode on John Bowers from earlier this year. Marguerite de la Motte was a versatile actress with an immense talent that deserves to be more well-known in film history. Thank you for everything, Marguerite. Please like and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the silent to talkie career of Charles Delaney. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your weekend.